Hi guys, it's Miss Smoot. So a few things. First things first is that this week, like let's see, the 10th, February 10th, the portal opens for rising 10th graders, which will be y'all because you'll be 10th graders next year, to start registration. Reminder that for lit class, you are selecting what class you want to do. I have my recommendations, typically that go based off of your first semester grade. But ultimately it's up to you guys. So you decide if you want to take honors 10th grade or on level 10th grade. And I don't think yet is the time when you say online or in person or hybrid. That'll come later, I think. I think you just have to select which one you would like to do. So that opens on the 10th and it will close on like the 15th, 16th. Just so that way you have plenty of time to make your decision. It's not a first come, first serve. Don't stress about it, but it'll be fine. All right. Now is when I'm starting talking about my video for things that are important in Fahrenheit. And let's be honest, I'm not covering everything important in Fahrenheit, but there are some scenes that I feel like people either get confused by or they kind of like read it and they're like, okay, I'm moving on. And so they move on from it. So I'm going to just make a stop and kind of slow down. As I hit these parts, you need to have already read them so that way you know what's happening in the story for this to make sense, because I'm not going to go into the in-depth detail. I'm treating this just like I would in my classroom when we've already read and we're just hitting the highlights. So here we go. Boom, boom, boom. And luckily, to try and make life a little bit easier, I have made a PowerPoint for us to kind of like help with images and stuff. And again, not everything important, but here we go. So just to like help with the first few pages, like it's very interesting way to start the book. As you guys found out last week, like it was a pleasure burn, such a weird way to start a story. And as you get into it, you realize, oh, like his whole point as a fireman is to burn and destroy, not save, which is unusual for us in our society. So disclaimer, because some people are confused by it, this is a futuristic society because it's dystopic, so we know it's based in the future. And so these are just some images from the first few pages of the graphic novel. I love the contrasting of colors, honestly. Like it really just helps me visualize it, like, you know, the fire and the brightness. And just like to see things blackened and changed, just like I like how the imagery they put with it. And then this is the graphic novel introduction to Clarice, and like she's wearing white, and she is young, we know that, and she's actually, you know, very angelic and pure. And I'll be very upfront because I have people say it every year. Like what's going on? Montag and Clarice never like play checkers or anything. He's fascinated with her because she's so different and unique. That's why he's like focused on her. I think she like is a little bit more into him than he is into her, in the sense that like she's like, oh wow, you actually like care about things. And so because he cares, she cares about him. But again, not in a checkersy way. Please do not imply that. That's what the movie got wrong, which was terrible. Don't watch the movie. But a dupe. All right, so I'm on page 7. And so they're talking about some things. She says, Clarice says, but I know something else you don't. There's dew on the grass in the morning. And like what's important about that is the fact that to realize there's dew on the grass in the morning, 2 things. 1, you have to wake your butt up early enough to go outside and look at it before the sun burns it all away. And 2, you have to actually take notice in it, because it's not necessarily the first thing you would notice. Like I don't go outside every morning. I'm like, all right, time to see the day, and now let's look at the grass. Like you have to actually make that conscious choice to actually note it and to like look at it. So the fact that she just slows down and really takes care of that. Next, she says, and if you look, you know, that sky, there's a man in the moon, and he hadn't looked for a long time. So you may have heard it like in nursery rhymes and stuff, but there really is, like, if you look at the face, a man in the moon. He's not going to win any beauty awards, but like, so if you look, there's kind of like 2 eyes, a little nose, and a mouth is how I see it. So here's, like, I drew out how I see it. Some people see it a little bit differently, but like, that's my man in the moon. It just, you know, depends. And so it's not very obvious and very upfront. You have to kind of like stare at it and really focus, be like, yeah, I mean, like I kind of see it, like, you know, there's like some eyes. I guess she's not super crazy. But it's kind of reminds me the idea of like cloud watching. And so if you look at clouds, you're looking like, oh, like that one kind of looks like a fish. Maybe that one looks like a lobster or like a drone. What would this one be? Like whatever. You make up your mind. You can't really like just be like, that's a cow, that's a clown, that's an ice cream cone, that's a woman riding a bicycle. Like you have to actually think about it and be like, where have I seen a shape like that before? So the whole point of the man in the moon or like watching clouds is it takes time to actually focus and give thought. And we know that's unusual for Montag, because the first few pages it says he's walking down the street with nothing in his brain at all, like empty up here, boom, boom, would echo. And so when they say goodnight, the fact that she asks, like, are you happy? It's really interesting to me that she really focuses on that idea, like, are you happy? Because she's taken interest in him and cares about him. And of course, like, oh, I'm happy. Of course I'm happy. But as you've realized in part one, he kind of comes to the realization, ooh, maybe not. And so how can I be happier? Page 9, once he gets inside. It was like coming home in the cold marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon has set. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside, and windows tightly shut. The chamber of a tomb world where no sound of the great city could penetrate. So when you hear words like that, like mausoleum, if you don't know what that is, look it up because it's probably important. Don't just brush past it. In case you didn't know, a mausoleum is like those little buildings are in the middle of a cemetery. And if you go inside, it's full of dead bodies. Like they're in their coffins stacked on shelves. And typically like a family will have a mausoleum. So honestly, the fact that he's comparing his bedroom, like, you know, the like center of his house and like where he, you know, would be with his wife, he compares it to a graveyard thing. Yikes, that doesn't show greatness for his relationship. I'm just saying. All right. So Mildred, we had all of that happen. When boom, did I miss it? Oh, so in the morning, it's really on page, I think, 17. So page 17, page 18. So the whole point of the wall TV or the parlor room is it's 3 entire walls are floor to ceiling screens. And that way Mildred can kind of get this whole like surround vision. And I stole it from Black Mirror, but that's kind of like what I imagine it would be like. And so you would think, since she just got one put in 2 months ago, she'd be happy. But no, she says, I want a 4th wall. And how much would it cost him? $2,000, which is 1/3 of his salary. So boom, do some math. He makes $6,000 a year. And that's really not that far-fetched as far as like 1950 salaries for firemen who've been doing it for a minute. Like that was a livable salary. So I did some math because I was curious. Oh, also Samsung made a TV like this. Like they jokingly called it the wall TV because it's the biggest TV you could get. So I thought that was kind of funny. So according to 2019, a fireman who had been doing it for about 10 years would make $64,000, give or take. So if that was 1/3 of the salary to have a TV put in, that's $21,333 for a TV. It's a lot of money. That is 42 PS5s or it's a brand new car. Like that's a lot of money to spend on just a TV. But Mildred's like, no, I have to have it because I can have the surround experience. So take that as you will. On page 19, when you have the buttercup happening, and I guess it's the last of the dandelions this year. I didn't think I'd find one along this late. Have you ever heard of rubbing it under your chin? Look, and so she holds it under her chin, and so if it like reflects on your chin, it means you're in love. I guess it's not a thing that people do anymore, but at least when I was a kid, which really wasn't terribly that long ago, we did it with buttercups, and you held it under your chin, and if it was yellow, it meant that you were like if it turned your chin like yellow, it meant that you were like you liked butter on stuff, which whatever. But so in this world, it means that you're in love with someone. And so that's just kind of like what it looks like. I just didn't know if you guys knew what it was. On page 22, I've been playing this game with my students in class, like real or not real. And like, so we talk about like how the snake in the beginning, real or not real. It's not really a snake. It's just a like fire hose. So that's not real. On page 22, starts talking about this hound. Hound real or not real? It's real in this world. So the mechanical hound is a machine that they use to hunt people. And they like code it in, and it's an olfactory system. That's the important part, is it based off smell, which is probably why it's called the hound. And so I was curious, and so I looked it up, and so like this is one image I found of the hound. I'm like, that's really like not that scary. It's kind of like Goddard, the dog from Jimmy Neutron. Or oh, what? Someone related it to the Franken dog. I'm like, that's kind of cute. And I found this one, and I think that's much scarier, and definitely how like I want to imagine it, because there's the needle that goes in the mouth that like gets people. It's got the little spidery legs and that tail. I think it like that's the kind of hound I want to imagine. So up to you. All right, so on page 33, we have the old woman at her house on the porch, and it's unusual because she's not supposed to be there. And she says this quote on the porch: "Play the man masterly. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out." This should sound kind of familiar to you guys because it's a quote that was said by Hugh Latimer, who's being burned at the stake in the 1500s. And what he meant by his quote, like when Hugh Latimer said it, was, yes, we are dying for what we believe, Ridley, but it's not in vain because we have lit a candle that shall never be put out. So like we have started something and supported something that even though we're dying, it's not going to die with us. It's going to keep going. And so the old woman says this, and then like, let's be honest, she's kind of the most BA woman because like as she's standing there, boom, there's Nicholas Ridley and Hugh Latimer. As she's standing there like on her porch, she's the one who lights the fire. And she's like, no, don't worry. I got it. And so it's interesting to me because she had said when they were talking to her, you'll never take my books from me. And so the fact that she's the one who chooses to start the fire kind of gives her back the control and her the power. Yes, she is dying, but I think she kind of knew that no matter what happened, she would die anyways. So she took it back into control into her hands. So boom. So this one kind of is like a long one. From page 41 to page 43, you actually see two different flashbacks. And so the first one is when Montag's watching her in the parlor room and says, like, the only memory he has of her is the significant memory he has of her is really was of a little girl in a forest without trees. How odd. Or rather, a little girl lost in a plateau where there used to be trees. You could feel the memory of their shapes, all about sitting in the center of the living room. So I'll be upfront. I'm never gonna like have you write about this particular scene like with a right or wrong answer. It might be like, what's your interpretation? But I'm gonna share mine with you because I looked into it because I'm like, that's a weird memory to have because clearly like she's never been on a plateau. She's never been in a forest without trees. So what is this? So I've done research. I've looked up what Bradbury was talking about, and this is basically what I've come to. So first off, this is a picture of a girl on a plateau in case you didn't know what it would look like. Finding one without trees, ignore that one in the corner. Probably should crop that out, I guess. It's very barren. There's nothing there. There's no life. It's just her sitting. Great. So I was really interested in, first off, obviously the little girl would be Mildred. We know that. The fact that he's calling his own wife a child, like the fact that she's childish and immature is like what my connection is. And she spends all her time with the TV or lost on the plateau. Like in the TV room. So she's lost on this plateau. The plateau is flat. TVs are flat. So already that makes my connection. But also, what she's watching on the TV, as you found out in part one, is nothing of substance. There's nothing there. She doesn't like have this huge takeaway. There's not like this life lesson that you can learn from it. She doesn't like learn to respect anything or keep anything. Like watching the Lorax, even though it's a kid's show, kids movie, you take the impression like, oh, we need to take care of the land. Like you don't learn things like that from whatever she watches on TV. So it's also very flat. There's nothing to take away. There's nothing of substance. So, tra la 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 la. That's what I think it means by plateau. So now let's go on to trees. She's lost on a plateau where there used to be trees. You could feel the memory all about them. I don't know about you guys, but in my living room growing up with my family, we had bookshelves in there. Like that's what was in our living room, our family room. And so I was looking into it. What they would do in the 1950s, or let me backtrack, also like 1940s, 30s, before TV really became popular, is the living room or the family room was to be together as a family and read books together, play games together, maybe listen to the radio. But you would be like spending time and doing things together and interacting. And part of why Ray Bradbury wrote this book, like he wrote The Pedestrian, which we've definitely seen some connections already, is the fact that, sorry, out of breath, not COVID. Is the fact that he wrote this because he saw how people are like, oh my gosh, technology is amazing. It makes everything better. Wow, this is great. But also, he was like, I think this could be a problem. So I want to make the story as a cautionary tale. So I feel like here his cautionary tale is, yeah, TV is great, but if we become too obsessed with it, we're going to lose the things that we enjoy and the things that make our society so great and give us connections, such as being in the living room together, which is why it's called the living room, like to live in there and be together, to spend this time together. So the idea of like books being what you would read or like spending time in the family room to read together is one way I interpret the whole idea of like lost in a plateau without trees, or rather where there used to be trees. You could feel the memory all around. So like there used to be time spent together in the living room. Another interpretation you could have, just because I wanted to give you guys some options. Trees make paper, which makes books, which tell stories. And so TV used to be able to tell stories and have some meaning. And now TVs and movies, like in our society, even today, they're based off of books and stories, and that used the same case in the 1950s. However, in Mildred's world, they are no longer based on stories. They are just like craziness that happens to distract people. So you could take that interpretation too. We need substance. And so that's what books or movies based on books even give us. I still think that books are better than movies, like when they have the interpretations, because there's so much richer substance to a book, but my personal opinion. So do you guys have a different opinion on the whole thing about the girl on the plateau where there used to be trees? I'd love to know, just because I'm curious. But those are the two interpretations I've seen that I feel backed up with Bradbury's interpretations and like the research I've seen about it. Side note, I didn't really cover it, but you should recognize when Clarice is talking about her uncle did this, her uncle did that. Her uncle once got arrested for walking down the street. Sound familiar to us? It should, because it's from the pedestrian. Is her uncle the pedestrian? Yes. So Bradbury originally wrote the story of the pedestrian first, obviously. And he enjoyed writing that story so much, he wanted to make a whole world about people who are addicted to TV and technology and give us a glimpse into what was going on in those houses. So that's why he wrote Fahrenheit 451. And this is the cover of the book, in case you haven't seen it. See, it's got like little matchsticks coming out of the book. Okay. Oh, I dropped my orange. It's fine. Boo-doo-doo-boo-boo-boo-boo. Okay, page 58. Beatty comes on the scene and he has this very long conversation. But basically, it breaks down into the conversation about how books changed, odd ducks, and then We Are the Happiness Boys. Those are the three categories I would break down. So make sure you understand what those three different parts are. I will say for the first part about like books to magazines to newspapers is that people wanted them to get shorter to be more digestible, and also people became, were reading things and they're like, hey, like I don't appreciate that they talked about women like this. I don't appreciate they talked about my ethnicity group like this. I don't appreciate how they discussed how white men are taking over the world. So as people became more and more offended by things, and they would just say, we're not going to read this anymore. Not by the government, but by the people's decision. So now, page 58. First off, I just want to make clear, because I had this conversation with my in-person kids, on page 58, he says, luckily, queer ones like her don't happen often. We know how to nip most of them in the bud early. I just want to be very upfront. Some of the words Ray Bradbury used have definitely changed meaning since then. So when this was put out, the idea of queer meant to be unusual or not like the usual way. So that's the instance of what he meant it in. It's not supposed to be any kind of statement. I would definitely not use this word in this way. I think it's definitely changed meaning. And so just recognize that, and we'll move on from there. There are a few other words when that happens too. So just, if you have questions about it, feel free to let me know. You can't build a house without nails and wood. If you don't want a house built, hide the nails in the wood. If you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to a question to worry. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. So the idea is like, you can't have a house without building the house with nails and wood. And so if you don't want someone to be unhappy, don't give them things to be unhappy or disagree about. And so my idea to think of it is like the house being like unhappy with the way the world's working out, with the way the government is don't give them one side of the argument to like disagree about or disagree, or, not see eye to eye on, because that causes disagreements, that causes people to start debating. And like, let's be honest, even in debates, like people get hot-headed and they get their feelings hurt. And Beatty's made it clear he doesn't want people to be unhappy. Not that we would ever have disagreements like this in America. I'm sure you can think of some recent examples. So we also know from Beatty, he's read a book in his time because he was curious. And when he found out books are pointless, he says that they are nothing, they contradict each other. So he gave up trying to listen to them. And so I feel like this is like one example of how it could be. He kind of hints like, hey, I know you have a book, so bring it back 24 hours. It'll be fine. If you don't, we'll come burn it for you. A little bit ominous, just a little bit. But he leaves. And Mildred's like, oh, hey, he's like, I don't feel good. Like, I still feel like really freaked out. Like, I don't know what to do. And she says, go take the beetle. This should kind of be familiar because in the pedestrian, he calls cars beetles. And so like, I just pulled up a picture to kind of show it. I'm so sorry, excuse me. And then she says, I always like to drive fast when I feel that way. You get to about 95 and you feel wonderful. Sometimes I drive all night and come back and you won't know it. It's fun out in the country. You hit rabbits, sometimes you hit dogs. Go take the beetle. What the heck? The fact that she has no remorse over hitting like a creature who hasn't done anything wrong to her, she just hits it with her car. What the heck? And I will say, this is not founded in anything. I have nothing to prove it, but I always enjoy when students have this interpretation. Is the second that we read that, people are like, I think Mildred hit Clarice with the car because Clarice died by car crash. So I always find that interesting. I'm not going to say it's true. I'm not going to say it's false. I love that theory. But just like how checked out and like disconnected she is to have any kind of concern or sympathy for any kind of animal, that she'd hit them with her car and think, oh, this is fun. Messed up. Cannot believe her. All right, long one. The last part on page 65 of part 1. So they're surprised, discovered not only does Montauk have a book hidden in the grate, I think you've probably guessed that by then, he has like 20 something and the one under his pillow. Like he has a bunch of books. Oh my gosh. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. And I've always thought that's like an unusual quote for Bradbury to pick, like that he put this in his book. I'm like, there has to be a reason. Ray wouldn't do me like that and just pick a random quote. So I'm going to explain to you why he chose that quote. And this actually, you could possibly be tested or quizzed on because this is important. So this quote came from Jonathan Swift's Gulliver Travels, which is a book that's satirical about like control of England. So the long and the short of it is, in Gulliver's Travel, this guy named Gulliver went to all these different places and saw all these crazy communities. There was one where horses ran the world instead of people. There was one where he was a giant, everyone was so small and they tried to kill him. There was one where he was small and everyone else was giant and they tried to kill him. So it's just like about his different journeys, and surprise, it's secretly about like government control and how stupid it is. So at one of the stops, he comes to this island and there's this huge like raging war going on between the people and between the government about where you should crack your egg. And I put a picture, I'll be honest, I've always cracked an egg on the long side. I'm not going to say you have to, but like that's just what makes the most sense to me. I've also learned how to do it one-handed. I'm very proud. But in this world, the government made a decree and like, nope, we say you have to crack it on the smaller end or like the chunky end, because if you don't, we'll kill you. And like, that's kind of an extreme stance to take. Yikes. So people, instead of saying, fine, government will do what you say, they were like, no, we'll fight you on this. I should be able to crack my egg however I want. And so they were dying for their beliefs that we shouldn't have to crack eggs on the thin side, on the small side. This should sound kind of familiar because we've had people die for their beliefs against the government all the time. Maybe in the 1500s. Maybe it's Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley dying for their beliefs about Protestantism versus Catholicism, because they said, no, we shouldn't be forced to be Catholics. We should have the freeness. We should have free choice to make our selection for ourselves. And so that's what Swift is alluding to, is when government takes too much power and the control and says you have to believe this and believe this way. And the fact that people are like, no, that's so stupid. We should not have to do it your way. We should be able to do it whatever way we feel. And that's what Swift was alluding to. And so that's why Bradbury put it in this book, because we also see the old woman who died for her beliefs on her porch and was like, no, you can't force me to do it your way. I'm doing it my way. And then she lets her own match. Boom, 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 boom. All right, cool. And so that's all I have as far as part 1. I'm not saying that those are all the important parts. I'm just saying that those are some that typically stump some students. So that's my video to help you guys out. Yeah, I hope you made it this far. It should be a-okay. I hope everything's going well, guys. I'm thinking next week, side note, next week, there's no school Monday, so you won't have anything posted until Tuesday. Enjoy your long weekend. I'm thinking next week sometime maybe we should have like a session where you guys can come and talk to me and be like asking questions. I figure like mid-morning is probably better. So my options are to do like mid-morning or the afternoon. So if you're like, hey, I can only do this time, let me know and we can figure something out. And we'll go from there. So hopefully that was helpful. I hope I'm telling you I'm not making this stuff up. Like these are all my annotations and things that I've kind of gone through, just because the book is so important and there are so many things to talk about. And so I wanted to hit the highlights with you guys. All right, I hope you guys have a great week and enjoy your long weekend and have a great Valentine's Day and a great President's Day and everything in between. And that's all I've got. Bye, guys.